Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com to watch our final edition of Inside the Zone, and then there were none.
Yeah, it was pretty quick, wasn't it?
Yeah, Northeast Indiana shut out of the state finals for the first time since 2005, so it's been a while where we haven't had to make plans for Thanksgiving weekend to cover high school football down in the Circle City. Before we get into our Player of the Year, Team of the Year, those type of awards, I want to get your final thoughts on what we saw this past week and on the season in general. What did you think were the biggest keys in the games that we saw Friday, Saturday?
Wow, you look at like maybe Snyder on Friday night and just their turnovers and the mistakes they made, and LaPorte really came out and was really energized in that game from the first whistle. But it was very Panthers-like the way they played in terms of making mistakes. And when you're this deep in the postseason, you got to make plays, and LaPorte made a lot more than Snyder. I think I'm not really surprised that LaPorte won. Just the route that they had over Snyder was big, so that for me really jumped out.
I was surprised that you're right, an un-Snyder-like game in terms of the mistakes that they made, because normally they're the ones forcing the mistakes by the other teams, Jesse Bates and that defense. And also, you don't see Snyder beaten by the run game very often. Normally they control the line of scrimmage. They keep the run game to a minimum. Charles Salary is a heck of a football player. I've seen a couple articles from the Indy Star that possible Mr. Football candidates. If you make the state finals and you have about 3,000 yards rushing, I don't know where his name is,
right?
Because I haven't seen it up there, but he really impressed me on Friday night.
Yeah, you look at his stats throughout the year, and you're like, okay, has he faced a defensive front like Snyder's defensive front seven? And the Duneland Conference is pretty solid, but not spectacular, especially this year. So you really kind of questioned it. Okay, was he really going up against a tough team? Definitely. I mean, that kid is very good. I think Mr. Football begins and ends for me with Markel Jones at Columbus East. Columbus East not going to state, but that kid scored over 60 touchdowns this year. I mean, and going to Purdue. So he's my choice for Indiana football. But if there was no Markel Jones, Charles Salary is, for me, probably the front runner. So I think he finishes second.
Yeah, and when you take a look at Bishop Luers falling to Andrean on a late field goal, that had a state championship game-like feel to it going in. I kind of felt like whoever wins that game ultimately wins the 3A state championship. Luers comes up just short. What were the biggest keys and your takeaways from that?
Luers not being able to run the ball was huge. They had a couple touchdowns by C.J. McCarter. But overall, I think they rushed for less than 10 yards, counting sacks and stuff. And, that Luers run game really hasn't been prolific. We've seen, pieces of it, every so often we've seen them. But not consistent, not consistently being able to run for 200 yards a game. And I think finally, they couldn't run against Andrean, and they really forced them to be one-dimensional, had some drop passes and stuff, just some mental mistakes in the passing game. So making them one-dimensional like Andrean did was huge for them. And I think, despite all that, Luers had a shot to win at the end, but Andrean had that late field goal.
And I know you spent your night in Cass County watching
South
Adams.
Royal Center, the sprawling metropolis of
Yes,
Royal Center.
it is, the Metroplex. That did not go as planned,
no, it didn't.
Which I think belies a really nice run by South Adams by the senior class. Rick Burkhalter mentioned it after the game, but 62-7, things just did not go their way in any way, shape, or form against Pioneer.
It was a competitive first half, or first quarter. The teams traded punts, and then Pioneer just found stuff that worked and just stuck with it, and South Adams really didn't have an answer. South Adams, the key thing for Pioneer is offensively with South Adams is they stopped the option pitch. Derek Warner really didn't have much room to maneuver. They were taking away the pitch from him, and after that was taken away, South Adams isn't going to beat you through the air. So it really shut to South Adams' offense down. But Pioneer was just too much, and they just kind of piled on there in that second half.